have a great next session coming up right here with Eastern Municipal Water District. So I'll give a brief introduction for our three presenters here and then pass it over to them. First up, we have Donna Kaminke, who's been with the district since 2015. She's a financial manager and has previously served as a senior financial analyst and a senior accountant. Donna's responsibilities include the development and management of Eastern Municipal Water District's budget, rate development, and long-term forecasting. Prior to entering public service, Donna spent years in the private sector as an analyst, accountant, and assistant controller, working for a wholesale auto auction and as an auditor with KPMG. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from the University of California from UCLA and is a certified public accountant. Joining her is Kendra Sotelo, who's been with the district since 2017. Her finance background spans nearly 25 years. She's currently a senior financial analyst, assisting with budgeting, rate development, and analysis, and of course, assisting with the district's long-term financial planning, as you'll see today. Prior to joining the team, she worked as an accounting clerk, accountant, and assistant controller in the private sector. She received her Bachelor of Science and Business degree with a concentration in organizational leadership from the University of Redlands. And last but not least, of course, we have Rebecca Robles, who joined the district in 2009. In her current role as a financial analyst, she assists with the district's budget, rate development, analysis, and long-term financial planning. We got a power team here. And prior to that position, she's held various positions under the operations and maintenance branch. She has an Associate of Science in Water Technology, and in May of 2025, she will receive her Bachelor of Science in Finance from Colorado State University Global. Early congratulations to you on that. So we're really excited for this next session here. We'll go ahead and pass it over to our three presenters. You should have rights to go ahead and share your screens. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I should be sharing, so if I'm not, please let me know.
Good to go.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Synario. We are very excited about this new tool for EMWD. We started design sessions in maybe the hottest week of the year in Philadelphia in August, and we have been building out our model ever since, much to our pleasure. And I'm very excited to have seen David and Brian's presentation because I feel like you have more years experience of using this model, so it's already given me some ideas on things that we will incorporate into ours. So yeah, we're going to start off with a presentation to give you some background about EMWD, our financial structure, the needs that we have, which probably mimic a lot of yours, and then we'll dive into the model. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kendra Sotelo for an overview of the district.
Thank you, Donna, and good morning. Thank you all for the opportunity to share with you today. Yeah, like Donna said, it's been fun developing the model, and we're kind of at the point now where we want to put it into play and see how it's going to work for us. So I just want to give you, provide a little background and overview of who we are. We're from Eastern Municipal Water District, known as EMWD for short, and we're located in Southern California. EMWD was established in 1950. And we'll be celebrating our 75th anniversary in 2025, so just a few months from now. We provide water, wastewater, and recycled water services to a population of nearly 1 million people that are both retail and wholesale sectors. So in addition to our retail customers, we provide wholesale water to other cities and local governments, local areas that then retail to their customers. Our service area covers 601 square miles and is only 43% built out. So this means we expect to see continued growth for years to come, which ensures employment opportunities as well as continued water supply to the community. EMWD is a member of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which is the state agency responsible for ensuring that Southern California continues to be provided with adequate and reliable supplies of high quality water, both now and into the future. Next slide, please, Donna. So EMWD is the 6th largest public agency water utility in Southern California, or sorry, in the whole state of California. We're governed by a 5-member publicly elected board of directors. whose primary responsibility is to ensure that our district maintains proper conduct and fiscal responsibility in service to the public within our service area. EMWD has over 600 employees and an annual budget of $619 million for fiscal year 24-25. As I just mentioned, our service area is only 43% built out, so this means that it's essential that we have a robust capital improvement program. Our capital improvement program currently has more than 200 active projects in various stages, such as planning, design, or construction, and is estimated to cost $785 million over the next 5 years. So you can see that planning for this is essential. $78 million, so roughly 10% of these costs, we anticipate to be funded by external sources through the acquisition of federal, state, and local grants. But the remaining amounts are to be funded internally from rate, fee, and property tax revenues. So funding these capital projects is essential, and thus the need for a reliable and dynamic long-term financial planning model. Next slide, please. So as is the standard in public agencies, EMWD has developed a 3-year triennial strategic plan by which we've established the standards and guiding principles necessary to ensure fiscal responsibility and responsible stewardship of public funds. Our strategic plan ensures that we take necessary measures to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective services to the population in which we serve, which includes the protection of public and environmental health. Additionally, it includes establishing and evaluating fees, rates, and charges so that our customers pay a proportionate share of the cost of the services that they're provided. And lastly, and very importantly, our strategic plan includes strategies to fund future infrastructure replacements and refurbishments through the use of reserves, financing, and rate revenue in a balanced manner that we can avoid future rate spikes to our customers. Next slide, please, Donna. So EMWD is a California special district, and therefore we receive property tax revenue from tenants who directly receive water and wastewater services within our service area. In response to the need to establish the proportional share of the cost to provide water and wastewater services, California passed Proposition 218, which protects property owners and guides utility setting by public agencies. Prop 218 aims to increase transparency and accountability in local government finance by giving voters more control over tax and fee increases and ensuring that property owners have a say in the imposition of assessments and fees related to property services. Prop 218 ensures revenues collected by local governments cannot exceed the cost to provide such services. It also establishes that funds cannot be used for anything other than their intended use and purpose, nor can they exceed the proportional cost of such service to a property. So overall, Prop 218 protects property owners while regulating rate setting by utility providers. Next slide, please. So in the state of California, California is a very large state. So although we are one state, we're probably the equivalent to multiple states for some of the agencies that might be on this call. But our sources of water are varied. With varying weather conditions within the state of California, the sources of water come from many different areas. A large area of that is imported water. California receives 75% of its rain and snowfall in the watersheds north of Sacramento, which is located north in the northern area of the state. However, 80% of California's water demand comes from the southern 2/3 of the state. Since EMWD is located in Southern California, which is an area of the state that receives far less rainfall than the northern portion of the state, a large amount of our water supply is purchased from the Metropolitan Water District. This water comes from the northern portion of the state known as imported water, and it's conveyed through to Southern California via the State Water Project's California Aqueduct. For perspective, the California Aqueduct is 444 miles long. So just to give you an idea of how long our state is, how big it is. In addition to receiving imported water through the California Aqueduct, EMWD also receives water from the Colorado River Aqueduct, which flows from state of state of Colorado through Arizona and ultimately to Southern California. EMWD has local water supplies available as well, such as groundwater, brackish desalination water, and recycled water and stormwater capture. Next slide. So the combination of these various water sources makes up EMWD's total water supply portfolio. EMWD continues to be forward-thinking and diversifying our supplies. Our most economical water supply sources are recycled water, which, as you know, comes from wastewater, groundwater pumped through wells, and brackish groundwater, which is treated at our desalination plants. Recycled water and desalination water help us to minimize the amount of imported water supplies that we rely on, allowing us to provide more economical water to our customers. Since local resources are limited in Southern California, the balance of our water supply currently is 44%. 44% of it comes from the purchase of imported water from the Metropolitan Water District. Our goal is always to develop new sources to provide more economical water and rely less on this more costly imported water. Next presenter, Becky, is going to share a little bit about financial planning, financial and rate setting information.
Thank you, Kendra. As Kendra mentioned, our budget for fiscal year 24-25 is $619 million. As you can see on the graph to the left, we have 5 sources of revenue, operating revenue being the largest component at $360 million. And this includes water, wastewater, and recycled services. And then the graph to the right, you're going to see we have 6 sources of expenses, operating expenses being the largest component at $280 million. Within the operating expense, our largest expense is water purchasing at $87 million. And then it's followed by our capital improvement projects at 26%. The use of recycled water benefits the district's water supply portfolio by decreasing pressure on our local groundwater basin, but also reduces the need to purchase imported water, as Kendra mentioned. So this graph is showing our recycled water sales broken down by different customer types. This is important since we have different rates for different customer types. As you can see on the graph, for agricultural, that was our largest consumers. We have approximately 850 accounts under the recycled. In fiscal year 23, we sold 29,692 acre feet. And then in 2024, we had a wet year, so we sold 27,040 acre feet. So this was a 8.9% reductions from the prior year. And this is like I said, it was due to the wet year. So weather is a big factor when it comes to customer usage. Next slide, please. With that being said, our water rates are broken into 4 tiers. It's structured to achieve changes in customers' behavior. We also want to make sure that our rates are ensuring our cost recovery and water use efficiency. So in June 2023, we completed the cost of service study, and we broke out our rates to align specific water supply costs with our rates. So if you can see, tier 1 is our lowest rate, and the cost includes water that is being pumped from our local groundwater, and then our base cost to treat the water, which is our base demand period. And then tier 2 includes the blended water from our 2 of our water filtration plants, and then MWD's untreated water, and then our base cost and our max day cost to treat that water. And then tier 3 and tier 4, it's all treated purchased water from MWD. And it's including a base demand period and also peak demand period, and a percentage of a conservation program cost into those rates. Anything else you wanted to know?
I just wanted to loop in the Prop 218 but Prop 218 legislation that Kendra spoke about earlier is really what's driving these first of all, tiers, but second of all, costs associated with it. So when we do our costs of service, we have to be very particular about capturing what costs are in which buckets, and therefore can afford us to charge certain rates at different tiers for different types of usage. So extremely complicated, and a lot of factors go into all of it, but it's essentially driven by that Prop 218 need to show a proportional cost of service based on the water that someone consumes.
So the district allocates household budgets based on household size, landscape size, and also based on the weather. So our customer indoor usage is 20% of their monthly water budget, and then the remaining 80 goes to tier 2, which is outdoor usage, and then anything on tier 3 is excessive, and tier 4 is wasteful, and covers any uses that if they exceed their budget. We had approximately 166 accounts for potable, and 82,578 acre feet of water was sold in fiscal year 2023.
166,000 accounts.
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, that's good.
The district's sewer rates are calculated using a baseline service charge and block factor, and as well as a sewer system capital project charge. Each block is designed around a specific household size to be more representative of the amount of wastewater contributed to the sewer system. As you can see in the table to the far right, so if you have a household of 1 or 2 people, you would be charged at block factor number 1, which is 65%. Most of our customers are block factor 2, though, at the 3 to 4 people, so they get charged 100% of that block factor. Sorry. Let's see. The district has approximately 273,000 accounts, and we do have 4 water reclamation facilities. The capacity of those facilities is 77 million gallons per day. However, currently we are only treating about 49 million gallons per day on average.
This is a look at our current 5-year capital improvement program projection. As Kendra stated earlier, we have about 785 million expected to spend over the next 5 years, which is an increase from the previous 5-year forecast, which was our current fiscal year included 686 million. So it's no joke, but we like to joke that we're a water district that is actually a construction company, because as we are only 43% built out, we are continually expanding our services into newer areas. But as we are also 75 years old, we have a lot of refurbishments and betterments that need to go on as well. So this drives to why an accurate long-term financial plan was so important for EMWD. It affects reserves falling below our target, which directly impacts rating agency targets as well. We have it would increase our borrowing costs if our credit ratings were to dip. We currently are at very high credit ratings, and we take that very seriously, as most people do. We would have to reduce our CIP budget, or we may have to, depending on the projects that are needed for system betterment and replacement. That could defer or cancel other critical projects, and emergency repairs obviously are always happening, whether you plan for them or not. And it could cause severe long-term water and sewer reliability issues, which is never something that, that's always something we would want to avoid. So yeah, so that leads to our current long-term financial planning. We'll go through this very quickly. We just wanted to give you some overview of what we need it for and what we've been doing. We have so many factors that impact us that drive our utility rates. And often we are asked by our board, our 5-member board, to really show them what rate increases would look like with cash flow projections and our reserves. And the ability to do this is really driven by our cost of service study, which I will forward to. This is another slide built on our cost of service study. And that cost of service study is an Excel spreadsheet, much like most of us have been using until we find Synario. And there are over 50 tabs that link all over the place on that spreadsheet. And though it's really robust and very, very well defined, it would not be something that knowledge transfer is easily attained, and it is difficult to use. And so, for instance, in this case, we wanted to, or the board was asking if we had an increase in our purchased water costs. So Metropolitan sets its own rates. And if we needed to, what would that look like for our projections? In addition to a new 5-year capital improvement plan, what does that do to our reserves, both water and sewer? We break out these costs. We try to show them in graphs. We try to show them in simple tables, but these simple tables and graphs take us anywhere up to a week to try to develop based on all of the potential changes that can affect it between our water supply costs and maybe the CIP projections. And in each case, we're creating a new Excel file of that 50 tab plus Excel file, because we don't have the ability currently, or we didn't have the ability to compare it in one overlay on one Excel spreadsheet. So these really massive crashing Excel spreadsheets, and the potential for error is scary. But hopefully that's probably why it takes us a week, to be honest, is because you're trying to avoid all of that. So all of those lead to the Synario model. The EMWD model with Synario gives us accuracy, agility, gives us scenarios, and all of that allows us to identify all of the driving structures of that strategic plan, like capital planning and cash flow projections, revenue requirements, rate stability, debt funding needs, and reserve utilization. So we have the wins that we feel that we're getting already, but even more so in the future with Synario is error mitigation, first and foremost. We can incorporate changes so quickly in the model, and it filtrates to everything that is impacted by that change. We have the assumption levers give us different scenarios, which we already saw David and Brian with a couple of different rate setting levers that clearly showed that first of all, it's clear to show our board what those assumptions are, and then we can real time show them all of these adjustments. We've built in the ability to turn on and off certain CIP initiatives, so we have some really major long-term CIP projects, especially related to drought measures in California. You probably have heard that we're a little short on water. We wish we could bring it in from you guys in Virginia. I think we'd be better off, and so would you maybe. But we certainly have some long-term projects that are very expensive, and it's great to be able to show the board the true impacts of what those projects mean and how they will benefit our constituents in the future. It gives us an enterprise view. We are water, we are wastewater, we are recycled water, but we also are EMWD as a whole. So the model has been built to give us views of all three of those. The model features, which you guys have been using much longer than us, but the explain features, being able the calculations and the component drill downs, the change logs. We've implemented the input manager, which I hear is a relatively new thing that kind of groups it together, which we'll show you in a minute. And the formatting for EMWD branding is very important for our organization. So let's get into the model. The first thing that we've been, I mean, we're very new users and we're very excited about it. So stick with us. We're learning as we go, but we've set up a new workspace to show, you know, some of the highlights that we would like to consider. Our scenarios here by service, we have water. This is the consolidated, but water, sewer, recycled, which shows our revenue requirements for each of those individually, which is fantastic. And we have it also summarized, but it goes into much, much more detail. And some of those details, we are accountants, so we are geeking out over, but we really appreciate the assistance that we've gotten from Synario to build out the model. So one of those is the types of water that we sell. So residential, you can see here we have that tiering structure that we showed you earlier. And we actually recognize our revenue by that tiering structure. So we have been able to really build out the formulas for these calculations, and this explain feature lets us really, honestly, right now, what we're doing is going through and vetting what we've built and how it looks and our, you know, initial information and how it's projecting and does that make sense. And some of the best features are being able to really drill down and see these calculations and maybe the amounts that we have put in there, or in some cases, the amounts we have yet to put in there. So it helps us to explain it, for lack of a better word than what they're already using. And in many of the cases, in our revenue and expense requirements, we have really been able to build formulas that are very specific for certain types of, for instance, revenue. So our water purchases is 50% of our entire water expense budget. And we've been able to dive into water purchases specifically and create a calculation that's really based on the supply costs. So one of the things I see us using in the future, much like David and Brian were doing, was to be able to offer a different views of our supply costs. For instance, it's not unusual for our supplier Metropolitan to anticipate raising their rates of water that we would have to purchase. But we, as a member agency of Metropolitan, we have board representation. So one of the things that we're often asked to do prior to Metropolitan approving any rate is we are asked as a member agency to provide our board member, who is on their board as well, the information to show how does each potential rate change of supply affect EMWD's rates or EMWD's expenses in the long run. So that is going to be a really great toggle because, you know, sometimes it's a 7% rate or increase, and sometimes it's an 18% increase. And it will be extremely helpful and quick to be able to dive into the expense side of it and really update that.
When I think of how we've built the model, like you said, Donna, we have water at varying rates. And like one example is like we sell recycled water at two different rates throughout the year, depending whether it's summer or winter. And that's always been kind of complicated when it's come to budgeting. So the model has kind of allowed us to break that water out. And when it comes to budgeting, we can take half a year's demand, normal demand, times a different rate, the other half a year times a different rate, and rather than one rate for the entire year. So the model to me is pretty robust in that way, that we can use varying rates throughout the year for different water types.
Same with our daily service charge, with our rates go into effect on a calendar year, but our budget is fiscal year. So taking that into consideration, I think that's also very helpful.
So yeah, we are an agency that has a fiscal year starting in July and ending in June, but our rates are calendar year. So we've been able to build out our revenue projections to consider the rates of two calendar year rates, because we have 6 months in one and 6 months in another. So that's been a great, and most of these are built on, we've loaded 5 years historical, so we're using 5-year averaging of volumes or 5-year averaging of growth and applying it going forward. But all of that is able to be adjusted and overridden if need be. So we've got that. We also, on the revenue requirements, have built in cash flow needs. We've built in, we meaning Nishant has really helped us with this. Let's be real. We are getting to know it, but debt coverage tests, we have a debt needs for projects at this point. We'll get into our projects in a second, or our CIP in a second, but we at this point have not shown the need for additional funding needs, but we anticipate being able to utilize this with these long-term CIP projections. Our CIP projection goes out 10 years. So we for sure want to be able to show the impacts of that over time with no rate increases, that will, some of those major projects that I was speaking of that are long-term and really progressive in the drought arena, we perhaps are going to need to show our board, that these projects, though, are very important to the long-term plan of not just EMWD, but for water sourcing in California. Those are projects that are going to be needed to be funded in part potentially by debt. So we have built that in. We have built in the days cash on hand to be able to help out with our rating agencies. We provide them information every year, and as everyone does, the forecasting becomes important for that. One of the things that maybe I am not, maybe Nishant can weigh in if he's allowed to, but this debt coverage test, I know that he has built, it's not just showing numbers that we've input, it's actually making calculations for these debt needs. So dependent on what we have input for our CIP needs and our rate settings and our revenue forecasting and expense forecasting, we can really dive into the calculation of, do we need to issue that debt? It's not us coming up with that.
Yeah, we've heard his name a couple of times here, so I'll go ahead and tag him in. Nishant, if you're on the line, go ahead and go ahead and chime in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Donna, Kendra, and Rebecca. To just add, it's been great working with you on this model as well. So thank you for the opportunity. But with regards to the debt needs itself, you are correct that we are not essentially typing in how much debt we are funding. Obviously, there is an area where you can control that part. But the debt needs for projects that we are looking at here is simply driven by a calculation based on what project costs you have, how much you can fund through internal reserves or PAYGO, and then it calculates to a targeted days cash on hand to derive an external debt funding. So what this calculation is trying to do is it's basically telling you this is how much debt you will still need to issue after multiple checkboxes are met. One being you have sufficient reserves, two, you have sufficient revenues after other forms of payments like expenses and debt service. It accounts for any other forms of funding you're receiving that can be used towards those projects. And then finally, whatever you may have remaining needs to now be funded through an external debt funding or debt issuance. So it's almost like a more automated type of calculation for the debt needs, which then automatically also drives any debt service calculations, depending on how much debt is issued by the model.
Thank you, Nishant.
Yeah, no problem.
And some of those factors that he's referring to are on our capital project impact page. We are very excited about this, being able to, the way that we have broken it out is we've identified, as Kendra said, we have more than 200 projects in capital right now under construction of some sort. So we've identified by service type, and also within each of that service type, we have the top 5 or so projects that financially impact that service. And then we've identified kind of an all others. And what that tells us here is that we can then turn on or off the view of each of these projects and show the impacts of just it if we wanted to, or for instance, water all others if we didn't want any of the top 5 projects. So we have some flexibility there. But the way that we have chosen to build it is this 10-year forecast out, that our 10-year forecast out for each of those projects, but we also are able to show the related grant funding we anticipate to get. And then we have chosen to break out different types of reserve funding that we would be utilizing for each of these projects. It's information that our engineering services group provides us anyway, but we're able then to really dive into these reserve balances by type and show for the 10 years out the impacts of not only each project, but of the CIP program consolidated, and what it means for our reserves, what it means for our projections, basically.
And then if we need just of the use of debt, if we are going to be issuing debt for any of the projects, we'll be able to consider that in here. Correct. And flow through.
Correct. Back into the revenue requirement down here. And then one of the other tables we thought we'd show you were some of the, this is a view of the input manager that Nishant has helped us build. So this one, that we have one for each of the services. I believe we have it for water and for revenue and for expenses. And we have them for each of the services. And this consolidates what we need to input if we want to change things on an annual basis, but also what we have input. And it is quite extensive, but it's very helpful to have it all in one place as opposed to kind of going through the individual tables off to the sides and, trying to remember where to put them. So that's been a really great win for us. Let's see, water expenses, some of the things that we have, actually, let's go here. Some of the things that we've chosen to do, within our operating expenses, other than water purchases, labor is the biggest expense type that we have. And we often have the need, we have a union here, and we have salary negotiations with the union. So we often have the need to show different salary increases as a potential for executive negotiations with the union. But we also then annually, at least currently with our current MOU, we adjust labor based on CPI. So if there is a need to project out in future years, we can segregate out labor to increase at a different rate than perhaps chemicals or electric or gas, all of which seem quite volatile in the state of California, at least. So we've identified different groups of assets to be able to project out different percentages as we go.
I think, like you said, you know, historically, we would maybe have applied like a CPI increase to some of these areas, like chemicals, for example. But these last couple years, we saw such significant increases up to like, you know, 25-50% increases in the cost. So the need to break out some of the larger expense areas and the ability to escalate at a different percentage for these larger areas is really something we've been doing manually, and to be able to drop it into the input manager and have it be applied right away. Like it's definitely going to be a benefit to us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I did want to add to tie it back to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's huge because not only are we just doing 5% across, but it's like taking into consideration the different, like you said, the different assets, which does affect the tier 1, tier 2 in a different way. And so being able to see that here, I think is huge win for us for that.
Another thing, you know, Donna, how we have the different, like our larger facilities, our plants broken out, like you see here, Menifee to Salter, Paris to Salter. We often are, you know, have the need to provide costs for a specific facility for the sake of incentives from state programs, and being able to see them separately as well as consolidated, you know, enables us to be able to provide that information in a, you know, more efficient manner, more accurate, and it benefits us in that we can set up financial incentive programs within like Metropolitan Water District by facility, if that's a program that's being offered at the time.
And that pretty much wraps it up for us. We're very excited to be using this tool. It is so helpful and time savings for us, and we're not even fully developed yet. We plan to take it to our board in the next couple of months, honestly, to show them, and we start our biennial budget cycle really in December, but certainly in January, and we will be utilizing this tool within that to show the projections based on, you know, all of the factors that we get at that time.
Alrighty, wonderful. Well, thank you, Donna, Kendra, and Rebecca, very much for all of your insights here. I think this was really, really informative. We got a couple of questions here I'd love to ask you, but we'll keep it brief just in the interest of time, so we can give some folks some time during the intermission too. I am curious just around rate increases in general. So you have a fair amount of detail in your model, and as we've mentioned on even our prior session, right, the level of detail is very much dictated by the need and how leadership digests this information. I take it for EMWD, you need the extra level of detail. But maybe from more of a process standpoint, how do you typically model rate increases? And, you know, some folks go maybe kind of the slow and steady rate, you know, incremental changes to rates year in and year out. Others operate maybe off of larger, more infrequent raises to rates. Does EMWD follow a particular method, and why?
We do. So our standard and guideline from our finance department is to perform cost of service rate studies on our different types of services every about 5 to 7 years. And those are projections for 5 to 7 years out. And though we annually are increasing our rates, we especially in the beginning, the first couple of years of that cost of service, we are basing our rates based on that cost of service. But as we get further from the actual study, some of the assumptions can change. For instance, the expenses of chemicals or our CIP projection of spending. So all of these factors can impact the increase of rates that maybe the study wouldn't have known, 3 or 4 years out. But our model is to increase rates every year, at least by some measure, and to be able to not have a rate shock, 5 or 6 years out. So we are very cognizant of the different types of rates that we have, the costs that are associated with them. So this kind of modeling enables us to really dive into what those look like, especially with the CIP planning. That's probably the biggest part of our rate considerations.
Got it. Thank you. And as you mentioned, a large portion of the funding for your CIP planning comes from, revenues attributed to rates. I'm curious, just from a planning standpoint, how impacted, let's call it, is your strategic plan if rate increases don't go as planned, right? We're talking scenario analysis here. What happens if rates, are either less than you need them to be or what have you? How impacted is your strategic plan? And do you have a typical process that you follow to seek maybe alternative fund generation?
Well, we do not have a process to seek alternative funds. However, we have a second source of income, which is property taxes. So our property tax revenue for our special district is available to spend in any way to operate the services that we provide. We are not limited on the things that we can do with that. So we do have that as something, but more to your point, what happens if we incorrectly increase or don't increase rates? We risk the potential of, not being able to fund those major public-facing drought programs that we're looking at funding, for one. For two, we risk the possibility of not being able to fund emergency repairs or even planned maintenance if we really got into a situation. We just transitioned that we have a city within our boundary that was providing its own water service. And it had been doing so for, maybe 50 years or so. And they just didn't have the rate increases and rate settings that was driving the ability to maintain their system. So it was really in big disrepair. And we have, along with our county and that city, just transitioned their customers over to our services, and there's a lot of infrastructure that needs updating and replacing. So it drives everything. If we are fortunate that our financial forecasting has created levels of reserves that really are quite robust, and we are able to, for instance, our last water rate increases, we are using some of our rate stabilization reserves to have lessened the impact of reserve increases or rate increases. So we do have that also as a potential offset maybe to rate increases. But if we were to really not drive it well, those reserves drop, and then our ratings, can plummet as well, which is not good.
Yeah.
And Michael, I was going to say, we just completed a cost of service study, and it came, on the tail end of unprecedented inflation rates. And so you can imagine that the costs and what that resulted in, what we needed to increase our rates at. So we do take a phased in approach so that, like Donna said, there isn't these rate shocks, so, year one being the highest, year 2, a little bit better year 3, and so on, to where there is more stabilization at the end of the, whether it's 5 to 7 year rate increase period.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. Donna, you spoke to some of the efficiency gains that you've found in kind of going through this process compared to the manual process that you went with prior with spreadsheets. I think I heard you mention at one point that it would typically take you, ballpark around a week in order to kind of generate the outputs needed to communicate financial results. I'm
Yeah.
curious, recognizing that you're relatively early in the process here. Any sort of a comparison that you can draw to what that's going to look like going forward for you all, and what the efficiencies there may have been?
Well, the efficiency, I think it'll take hours. What used to take us a week, and that was just crunching the numbers. That wasn't even the presentation side of it. Literally can take hours or on the fly. So we can be in a meeting with our CIP group, talking about the 10-year projections, and it's often the case that our engineering services, which drives our CIP program, they're optimistic, and they have a lot of things on the plate, and they're often asked to go back and revisit that total amount and maybe scale it down a little bit for the things that are really needed in the shorter term. So I find that we will be able to utilize it for, just on the fly. Again, I said the labor discussions that I know that happen with negotiations with the union. What if it's 2%? What if it's 3%? What if it's 18%? Whatever the cases are, again, those can be done on the fly. So what did used to take a week or so, and then I'll be honest, we're always apprehensive, because you want it to be accurate, but you want it to be fast, and you don't always get both things at the same time. But I feel like with Synario, we can. So that's a really a big time savings win for us.
That's wonderful. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news. Certainly excited to see what the future is going to hold for EMWD, and see how you all are able to kind of leverage this new process going forward. Donna, Kendra, Rebecca, thank you very much for your presentation here and for all of the insights that you provided. Much appreciated.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you.
All right.